That is a very good point, because one of the things that I do at work is I rank top 25 teams as I see them, and then do a playoff prediction mostly based on those rankings. And one of the things that I thought was most interesting is how I would much rather be the number 5 seed than the number 1 or 4 seed. Like 1 through 4, I would much rather be the 5. I get to play off home game against a team that I would probably play in the non-conference anyway. So, like, it's not out of the question that Oregon could play Boise State again, 5-12 matchup at Autzen. And we know how that probably goes. Also, I'm going to be able to play the number 4 seed, which at this point feels like Iowa State. We're going to pick Oregon. Would you rather have the bye? I don't think you would, because by the time you get to that number 5 seed, you've already played a game yourself, so that bye week no longer matters as much as it did. I'm curious to see how this plays out and whether or not the selection committee decides to do what I think I would do, which is manipulate this so that we get the matchups that these seedings were intended to give, as opposed to, why the hell do we have a team that played in the Big Ten Championship or the SEC Championship matched up against Boise State, what have you, knowing we're probably going to give them the easier road to a national championship, which leads me to Colorado versus Kansas State. I think we're going to have a hard time getting a second team from the ACC and the Big 12 into the playoff if things keep trending the way that they are trending, with 9 SEC teams and I believe 6 Big Ten teams in this week's top 25 alone. But that Big 12 championship is still going to get you automatically qualified, we think, unless Boise State can somehow be one of those 4 ranked Power 5 highest ranked champions, not Power 4 champions. So knowing that the stakes are all over the map for the Big 12, do you expect perhaps a potential Big 12 championship participant to come out of Kansas State, Colorado? I don't know. Is that a good question to ask at this point?
It might be a little early, just because it's tough. It's tough, but we get so much more information every week. Like, here's some information that Colorado fans were killing us on Twitter because we said this summer CFB 25 having Colorado as the 20th best defense was completely unfounded. They were in the 140s last year. There's only 133 FBS teams. It was bad. They were in the hundreds. And then this year they're like, well, what about this team we beat and this team we beat? And then the big one was UCF. And now we see UCF had 6 points against a pretty bad Florida defense until they went into prevent and at the end of the game put on a late touchdown. So, that's more information that we can now react to, but it still feels early to me. I can't believe we're in week 7 and we're saying it's early for us to make those sort of at least look around the corner guesses, because you've got a number of undefeated still teams in the Big 12 right now, and some of those are going to be good teams and some of those are going to be pretenders. But like BYU and Iowa State right now look great. Like, they look legitimately good. Kansas State, what do we know about that BYU game? Like, was it a blip on the radar? I mean, 38-9 is quite a blip. Or is the team that handled Oklahoma State the one that we should be looking at? By the way, that one-score win at Tulane, not looking so bad right now. That win against Tulane for Oklahoma, not looking so bad right now. Like, that's a decent football team. So, to me, it's so early that it's hard to tell. But I will say this. The losers of conference championship games are so unequally punished versus everybody else that makes it in as an at-large that it's really not fair. And they need to get rid of conference championship games in general. I think they're silly at this point. But you think about a team like Notre Dame, who, super genius, by the way. Like, don't join a conference. Don't join the ACC. Keep your, all the TV deal money to yourself. But also guarantee yourself a home game in the playoffs every year. Because in 11, people are still talking about Notre Dame in the playoffs. And, like, it's ridiculous that you would count them out for losing NIU. They probably won't play a ranked team this year, right? Maybe if A&M doesn't pull an A&M and they hang on, that'll be their only ranked opponent all year. They beat them in the first week of the season, I think. But Notre Dame, no, they can never get a bye. But, yes, they will always get a home game. That almost likely, and that's free money, like local business and for your university, but it also pretty much guarantees them a spot in the playoffs every year. But then you've got teams that play that extra weekend, aren't sitting at home. So Notre Dame effectively gets a bye. Anybody that gets an at-large bid that doesn't play in a conference championship game gets a bye. So I think you're almost better to not play in the conference championship game, keep a high ranking, don't take that loss, and just come in as a 7 or a 9 seed and not have to get beaten up against what's going to be guaranteed a good opponent that conference championship weekend.
It's a very good point, and it also brings about the tinfoil hat among us in that, are you going to manipulate this so that a Notre Dame might get in over what is a more deserving program, perhaps? Let's call it the University of Tulsa, who sucks right now and is my alma mater. But that's why I'm bringing it up. You going to put Notre Dame in, or you going to put in an 11-win TU? That's not a hard question for me to answer, knowing that we do play these games because of the television money. To the conference championship part, I hear you, dog. But, like, for me, I look at championships as banners. So, like, I think there's something like 500,000 YouTube channels with 100,000 subscribers. Doesn't change the fact that I would want my plaque. So if we get to play for championships, I want to play for a championship. The rest of it be damned, so I can get my little hardware. And then if I can go for the big one, right, let's do that. But I like to have that game because I do think it's meaningful. But I'm also a different kind of college football fan, and I admit that. The thing I wanted to really
I'll give you a little pushback on that because – one, have you seen the tiebreaker scenarios in the SEC and the Big Ten? And it's like, did you wear the correct size shoe last Tuesday for half of your team, or did someone wear black, and blue together? If you did, you're disqualified because you could legitimately have 5th or 6th team down winning a tiebreaker that has nothing to do with the games on the field because the conferences are so big now that unless you have 10 or 11 conference games, everybody ain't playing everybody. So to me, I think it's like let's put down the facade and admit that the emperor is butt-ass naked and just say, okay, here's your regular season championship, awarded based on the standings, and let's get on with it. Because do you think, was it 22 Alabama or 21 Alabama would rather have that national championship trophy for that where they lost to Georgia, or the SEC championship trophy when they beat Georgia? I don't think they even care about the SEC trophy at this point. So I think we got to find a way to award champions in the same way that they do. We're trying to NFLificate this sport. So if we're going to do that, how does NFL do it? I mean, they do it based on seeding. I mean, they seed based on records and let that be that.
I like the point, and I think it's a good one. I really do. I just don't trust us to be adults about this, Daniel. Like that's the thing that really drives me crazy about college football. As much as people want to be purist or are claiming this or that is ruining the sport, they also do not want to do what I think you and I would like, which is let's be honest about what it is that we are after here. And let's be open to the conversation that perhaps some of the things that we have put in way are just clothes that we're asking that emperor to wear. When really, nah, dog, you're the emperor whether you're wearing the clothes or not. Can we move along with this? I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're ever going to get there. I think there are too many people that care about decorum and tradition for tradition's sake. Because even with name, image, and likeness, right, when it comes along, we don't even have the fortitude to put in good rules that everybody would have to follow because we're afraid of what we might not be able to maximize for ourselves. It's why attorney generals are filing suits left and right. It's why you will have somebody that will play an arm and a leg for a player that probably isn't in that same market just because they would rather have him sit on the bench for them than go play for the opponent. Like Manchester City in the EPL. Does it work from a financial standpoint? Yeah. Does it make the sport a little less fun? Also, yeah, but you're still watching it, right? And I think
thought you were going to say like Texas A&M, but okay. So I think it really boils down to the fact that conference championship games make a lot of money. And let's not kid ourselves. Like, I talk about this. I don't know if you remember. There's old heads like me that remember when regular seasons used to be 11 games, right? And back then they were talking about playoffs. And what did they do instead of playoffs? They said, okay, we're not going to do the playoffs, but we're going to give everybody a 12th game. And you know why? Because that's 130 teams that play a game versus 4 teams that play a game, an extra game. And so it's all about money. And they're not going to take a game that's established and accepted that prints money off the books now because we've expanded the playoffs. They're just going to take more money because we've expanded the playoffs. And I think that does come into, we could talk for hours about whether or not that's a good idea for player safety and things like that, which I don't think it is. But at the end of the day, you can't have super conferences that get bigger and bigger and have conference championships mean something, because you're literally going to have 4 or 5 teams with the same conference record that, you look at Missouri or look at Miami. Miami will not play a top 50 team this year, 5-0. They will not, at the end of the year, when it all shakes out, they will not have a team on their schedule that's in the top 50, right? How do we know how good Miami is relative to the rest of the ACC for them getting in the conference championship game versus somebody else? We don't. So yeah, I think it's a little silly. I could rant all day, but I'm going to hold you up, so I'm going to let you keep rolling.
I want to ask this question sincerely because I think you know better than most how much I despise most Heisman voters. Not the Heisman Trophy, but it's just too bloated. There are too many people that get to vote on it. I say this as a man that gets to vote for the Broyles Award, and there might be 24 of us that have that opportunity, that honor, and that is because the finalist list should be unassailable, right? The 3 guys that should be up to win that award, any one of them could win and should win, right? It's just who do we think is the best among those 3? However, when I look at the Heisman Trophy, they get it wrong as much as they seem to get it right. This year, I can't believe I'm actually having to convince people what Travis Hunter is doing we've never seen done before, and he's doing it at a high rate. The only question is whether or not he can sustain this for the rest of the year, while I have other people that want to tell me about Ashton Genty who can't remember Donald Brown, who can't remember Donald Pumphrey, who don't even know about LaDainian Tomlinson. And I'll tell you, this is what he's up against. He may rush for 2,400 yards. Barry Sanders rushed for 2,600. I'm asking this sincerely. What does Travis Hunter need to do for you to win the Heisman Trophy?
He doesn't have to convince me because he'd be in New York. For me personally, just because I have always maintained, I maintain this at every level. At some point, 50 years ago, a bunch of idiots decided that you can't be the best player in the country unless you play for the best team. It's the same way that AP voters say, hey, you play the first, second, third, and fourth best team in the country. You lost to all of them, so you can't be in the top 25. Like, okay, I can't beat the number 1 team, so I can't be ranked. I have to be the best player on the best team to win an individual award. It's insane to me. And it's funny because you'll see the national tenor around who should get in the Heisman Trophy candidacy. You'll see it change after big games. Whoever did the best in a big game is immediately up at the top. I think Jalen Milroe has improved dramatically under DeBoer's offense. And I think he's playing really good football. But like everybody met at the top of the Heisman list after he beat Georgia, but he didn't beat Georgia. Alabama beat Georgia. Kalen DeBoer's scheme beat Georgia as much as Jalen Milroe did. So for a guy like Hunter who could walk onto most P4 squads on either side of the ball and start is crazy. But he's not going to put up crazy numbers. People don't remember Charles Woodson being an elite talent or Ndamukong Suh being elite talent and not putting up numbers that they can relate to. And I think it's really because once you dilute the pool with too many people, there's regional bias for sure, but there's also this thing that like I can't relate to you being good unless I see numbers that are as good or better as someone else who's been in that spot. And I think that's a little ridiculous too, because each year is different. We talked about what defenses are doing now. If you're performing at a high level offensively, it could be 70% of what somebody won this trophy in 2018 or 2019 was, and be better than them, just because how things shake up year to year. Marshall Faulk would have been my reference point there. By the way, I used to watch him on Saturday night on ESPN when nobody else is watching. So that would be mine.
Look, man, I'm with you, and I think that's the reason why I started that conversation with could they appear in the Big 12 championship game, because I think if he has a big game in there, you can sew it up. To your point, though, Tua Tagovailoa was going to be the 2018 Heisman Trophy winner, And then he got hurt, and Jalen came in, and Kyler went off against Texas, and Kyler wins the Heisman Trophy. I don't like the recency bias week to week. I do know that I make content every day around college football, and one of the things that we talk about every week is the playoff, the rankings, and who's going to win the Heisman based on what we have seen and based on those numbers. I'll add this for any Heisman voter that is watching this, though. Travis Hunter is the first player in history to have 10 TDs and 5 INTs since we started going to Division I. Like, I should say that. So, and if you want to take it further, you can. But what Charles Woodson did at Michigan doesn't even rate what Travis Hunter is doing presently at Colorado. It's just whether or not you think Colorado is a good enough team, which, as Daniel so aptly pointed out, should not matter.
I will give a little bit of context that I think is fair. If you're a voter, it is fair to want to see him play good teams.
Is Kansas State a good team?
I don't necessarily. I'm sorry?
Is Kansas State a good team?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
That's what I was saying before. Like, when you look at their schedule, you don't know if that 38-9 against BYU is who they are or dump truck at Oklahoma State. But I'll say this: like, it's hard to do. It's hard to contextualize if you're a voter and you see so much bigness of weekends concentrated in the SEC and the Big Ten to really properly contextualize what Hunter's doing. And I think that's where it hurts a team like Colorado to not play a team like Georgia out of conference, right? It hurts because you want to see look, if Travis Hunter did any of what he does, if he did that one weekend versus Alabama in week 1 or week 2, recency bias wouldn't matter. He would have that data point to hang on, and he would ride that out to at least a trip to New York for the rest of the year. But also, to your point, I think we've got to sometimes get outside of the box of just looking at numbers and box scores. And I say this as someone whose whole show is based around that, and just watch him play. Like, let's put all the numbers aside. The guy's out there for, over 100 plays every game. Like, watch the guy play. And from that standpoint, I think it's pretty clear that he's one of, if not the best player in the country.
That is Daniel of College Football Nerds. He and his buddy Josh do an outstanding job covering the sport. If you think that you are smart about college football, you will watch this channel if you haven't already, because these two men will make you smarter. Daniel and Josh are mentions for me. Both of these guys have come through for me in ways that I can't even begin to describe to you. If I tell you that they're smart, remember that it is me who's giving out that one, and I don't give that one out to too many people. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me here on the #1 college football show.
Thanks for having me. You have a blessed week.